Call this evening's meeting of the Peoria City Council, special meeting of the Peoria City Council to order. Welcoming our guests on cable channel 22, and also I was asked to announce that Steve Tarter's here with the Peoria Journal-Star tonight. So, Madam Clerk, the council microphones are open for roll call.
Mayor Ardis.
Here.
Councilmember Akeson.
Here.
Councilmember Sear.
Here.
Councilmember Grab. Councilmember Jensen.
Here.
Councilmember Montalongo. Here. Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Euler.
Here.
Councilmember Riggenbach. Councilmember Ruckriegel.
Here.
And Councilmember Turner. You have a quorum present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'd like to invite everyone to join us and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to make a quick announcement before we get started this evening. I'll make it again at the end, in case we have some people listening in at the beginning and listening to election results at the end. On April 7th, there will be a gathering for Team Reardon, which is firefighter Nick Reardon's family. Over the past 8 months, Team Reardon has grown bigger and faster than anyone could have imagined. And now they're going to have an event to bring a lot of people together to celebrate Nick and also his family, and additionally to raise money for Nick's fight against cancer. This event will be held at the Knights of Columbus on Radnor on April 7th. There will be a DJ. They'll have live music by the Cusack Brothers, dinner, cash bar, silent auction with raffle items. And they would just like to encourage all of us to go out and support the family as Nick continues his battle against cancer. So we're going to put that up on our website tomorrow, if it's not already up there today, and would encourage everyone to go out there and show strong support for the Reardon family. Madam Clerk, do we have minutes? We don't have minutes today. Mr. Manager, why don't we start? I'll let you kick this. I guess we got 2 items of unfinished business. Just for the listening audience, just so they know, because we got several phone calls today. In regards to the discussion tonight on the waste collection, there's not going to be any official action on this tonight. This is for discussion purposes only. It's setting us up for a decision that's coming down the road. So this is not an action item this evening. Madam Clerk.
Our first item of unfinished business is 18-049, is a request to concur with Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance amending Appendix A of the Code of the City of Peoria relating to multi-storage, mini-storage uses.
Councilman Montalongo.
Thank you, Mayor. Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel. Is there discussion? Okay. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to, I remember last week, I think it was, we deferred this item. Was there a date set for when it would come back? Last meeting, I thought it was in 2 weeks. Just wondered. I thought it was in 2 weeks that this was coming back. Ms. Clerk?
Yes. What Councilmember Montalongo's motion was to defer it till the next meeting. And I think we were all notified prior to the last week's meeting that it would be March the 20th would be our next meeting. I confirmed that with Councilmember Montalongo, so that's why it's on
Okay,
tonight.
so I wasn't the only one that was scratching my head as to why this was coming forward. Okay, thank you.
Yes. If there's no further discussion, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Item 18-065 is a request to concur with the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission to adopt an ordinance approving a special use in a Class C1 general commercial district for a multi-story mini storage and truck rental facility located at 4400 North Brandywine Drive.
Councilmember Montalongo.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel. Is there discussion on this item? Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you. I do have one question as to the impact of the number of storage vehicles or truck rental vehicles that will be traversing that area. Has the community been polled as to any concerns that they might have? I see none presented at the public hearing, but if I'm reading that correctly, it is the normal zoning public hearing, not a different special public hearing on this issue at all. So I just wondered if any neighbors you might feel may come back later and say there's too much truck traffic, too much junk being put out of storage facilities by folk and not disposed of properly. Have you had any feedback or reached out to the community? I guess that's a better question, if you reached out to your neighbors in that area to see if they have any concerns about that. No, this is for the councilman, because you wouldn't have talked to folk, but he's in touch with his district, I would imagine, so he would know more than anybody else if there's any concern.
Sure. So at least one meeting, open meeting that I had, the petitioner was there, and so were several representatives from the neighborhood that is adjacent to the property. So it was briefly talked about. And they were there to talk to me about another item. So there was a large member or a large amount of residents. I think it was more about the bus transfer station that they attended my meeting. So when this item was talked about, they seemed to be all in support of it. In addition to it, talking to the petitioner, he did go door to door as well, and has full support from the people that he talked to. I have not heard any negative feedback from any, nor emails from anybody.
And that's always good to know, because the zoning meeting that we have, as most of you know, is during the day when most people are working. But the fact that he's had separate meeting, probably in the evening or something when this other item came forward, means a lot more to neighborhood concerns. So with that, I have no objections.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing no lights, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
We would be at the policy session. 18-071 is a communication from the city manager with a request for a policy session to discuss waste collection services. And if we could have a motion to go into policies, that would be good.
We have a motion to go into policy session. Councilman Ruckriegel, seconded Councilman Euler. Seeing no discussion on that, please cast your ballots to go into policy. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have a PowerPoint slide deck that we'd like to put up on the screen that we'll walk through this evening with you to talk about the issues this evening. The intent of this policy session is to try and circle back with you and talk this evening about some of the pricing that we have back from the respondents to our RFP. The agenda that we'll walk through would be first we will walk through the existing solid waste services that we currently provide. I'll do a very quick recap of the public input since we discussed that at our policy session on February 10th. Give you an overview of the RFP and some of the elements of that request for proposal. We'll talk about some of the cost projections that were in our model that we put together and some of the cost scenarios, and then the recommendation staff has for you. And then we'll open up the floor for questions if we could. So, and this first part is really to just kind of jump back in and to recap some of the existing services that we currently have. We have weekly trash pickup. We have toters that are 35, 65, and 95-gallon toters. We provide that service to just under 40,000 households. When it comes to bulky pickup, we have unlimited weekly pickup of bulky items that are included in our pickup. On recycling, we currently have single-stream recycling. It is a subscription-based program through Peoria Disposal Company. It's provided once a month. We utilize the 95-gallon recycling toter to provide or to participate in the service. It requires a $50 deposit for the recycling cart, and about 25% of our households currently subscribe to that service. Landscape waste collections, we have a seasonal landscape waste service that's provided from April 1 through December, the first week in December, excuse me. We have weekly unlimited collection. The residents would own their containers, or they would have to use approved bags, and we will collect grass, leaves, tree limbs, and brush as part of that landscape waste service. In addition, we have some non-residential collection services that are built in, which includes our stacked condominiums, the city buildings, the Peoria Public Schools are included. We also have other contracted services as part of that, where we have neighborhood cleanup boxes. PDC assists us with tire disposal and dead animals. And then ultimately, the disposal costs that we have for all of that is built into the contract that we have with Peoria Disposal. On the revenue side, we have our solid waste fees, the garbage fees that are set up. In 2018, it's $17 per month, and it will increase $1 per month in 2019, 20, and 21. So that just gives you the baseline of what our current revenue scenario is per household. So moving on into the public input, as you know, going back several years, this has been the direction the council has given us, that we solicit public input into this process. We utilize the assistance of a local firm to help us with this public input. What we tried to do over the course of that was to really talk about what the public wanted out of their waste services, and there were some key takeaways that we had. Obviously, recycling was probably the most discussed issue. It was the issue that most of the residents felt that we needed to do more in terms of offering from a frequency standpoint, and an option standpoint, and an education standpoint. There were some residents that felt that extending the yard waste season would be important, looking at what we could do to expand on that. I think that the residents that we talked about at some of the public meetings felt that there should be more in terms of public outreach, sharing more information with the public, more education with the public was important. This is an important point, I think, and it's down in the bottom right. There really weren't many customer service complaints for PDC, so there were not a lot of complaints that were coming back from the public saying that we have problems with PDC. But there was, I think, some discussion overall about how do we balance that responsibility between the city and PDC, and how do we clarify that, which that points back to the education and outreach. The other key insights, we then provided a survey to our residents. We had people taking it online. We hand-delivered it. As we've talked about, 4 out of 5 residents said that they are very or moderately satisfied with the services that we currently have. 3 out of every 4 residents said that they would support increasing the frequency of recycling to every other week. And then 2 out of 3 indicated that they would be willing to pay more for that service. So in summary, as far as the key insights, recycling had the greatest influence on the overall satisfaction level. And I think really that was trying to improve the frequency of recycling services. However, as we started talking about yard waste, and we talked about this at our last policy session, there was less support generally for expanding the yard waste season, and there was less interest in being willing to pay for that overall. So let's jump into the RFP. We issued the RFP. We asked for proposals to be back to the city staff in November of 2017. We asked for a base bid that would include trash collection. It would also include the disposal of that trash. There would be responsibility for the maintenance of the trash carts and the purchase of the trash carts. We wanted to make sure that we had recyclable materials that were being collected and processed. We wanted to look into ensuring that we had recycling carts as part of that, potentially looking at any grant opportunities we might have, and then also including landscape waste and landscape waste disposal. We also included, as we have in our current process, our current contract with PDC, we wanted to make sure that we were addressing the stacked condominiums and that there was not only the collection but the disposal of that waste as well. And then ultimately that we were collecting and processing recycling materials. So from that perspective, we had 4 bidders. We had Advanced Disposal Services, we had the City of Peoria, we had Peoria Disposal Company, and we had Waste Management. We had 3 of the 4 provided alternate bids. There was a base submission from Advanced that requested a longer contract period. But overall, the pricing as laid out by the 4 bidders is included on the slide that you see here. Overall, the Advanced, when you included residential waste, the education component, recyclables, and landscape waste, their household cost per month was $14.80. And then the cost for other disposal fees for stacked condos, city buildings, county buildings, and Peoria Public Schools rolled up to about $308,000 a year. The City of Peoria for waste collection services, recyclables, and landscape waste totaled $8.25, with the other fees rolling up at about just under $118,000 for that. Peoria Disposal provided in their base bid a base bid price of $15.74. There was about $95,000 of additional cost that was built into their proposal. And then Waste Management had a total all-in cost of $23.62 per household per month, and that included all of the other ancillary costs as well. When we moved on and we asked for an overview of the alternates, we asked for the alternate bids to be included as well if the respondents wanted to provide alternate bids. The City of Peoria provided an alternate bid that included the city purchasing recycling toters. That changed the total household per month to $8.08, and then the $118,000 of other costs. PDC had alternate proposals that were included that would opt in the county and Peoria Public Schools as one of that, both in alternates 1 and 2. It included incentives, which I will talk about here in just a minute. And they also included an additional $4 per month fee for any additional trash carts if somebody wanted more than 2 trash carts. PDC's alternative 2 is less. You can see PDC's alternative 1 was $11.61 and had $128,000 of the additional costs for the other services. PDC's alternate 2 was lower because they were proposing curbside collection services with alternate 2, which would be a change for the areas of the city that we have alley collection in. And so that was a significant change that we talked about with them. Waste Management's alternative only included 6 bulky pickups per year, so there was a restriction on the number of bulky pickups that we could have, and they reduced that dollar amount down to $20.18 as a total cost for their proposal. So jumping back to talk about PDC's incentives, And these are still good. We've had discussions with PDC over the last several months that's good through next week. First, their first proposal was to forego the 3% contract escalator that they're entitled to as of, or that they have actually received as of January 1st, 2018. That amounts to about $96,000 on the contract. They have also included as part of this that they would forego the final 2 years of the toter payments that we have. We have a rental contract with them. It's a lease to buy for our garbage toters. That rolls up over 2 years to be about $580,000. They have also agreed to, subject to a couple of changes to the 2009 landfill agreement, agreed to pay both the city and the county, or accelerate the payment to the city and the county of $450,000 each for opening up landfill 3, if they could change the operating hours as part of that 2009 agreement, and then also that they would have the ability not to open a landscape waste facility, have the option to not open a landscape waste facility at the landfill. So we had a review team that included myself. It included Josh Gabehart from Foth. We had Patrick Nichtine, the city treasurer, Jim Scroggins, the finance director, Scott Sorrell from the county participated. We had, and we also had Dave Myers from Peoria Public Schools that was on the evaluation team. So as we looked at the evaluations, and there's a change that I have to point out here from what's from the handout that was in the packet. There was a calculation error under the compliance to the RFP section. This is a review and a summary of the total scoring that came out of the evaluation by the 5 evaluators. Josh Gabehart from Foth did not do any of the evaluations. What we looked at is that PDC finished first with the highest ranking. The evaluations corrected that error that we had in the compliance to the RFP. PDC was superior in their understanding of the work, their qualifications, their compliance to the state and county, and their references. So those were all the areas in the evaluation criteria that the evaluators said that PDC scored the highest in. The city was superior in customer service, pricing, compliance to the RFP, and then with virtually no exceptions, they topped the list there. So there was a split between the two. As you can see from the rankings, they were very close as they came forward. So now we'll move on to the cost projection model. What we tried to do, and this is also in your handout, is try to calculate some of the cost projections that were if we were to incorporate all of the costs and run those costs out over the life of the contract. So we included the general cost for both the residential units and the stacked condominiums based upon the responses of the bidders. We then took a look at some of the other areas to see if we might be able to add back in some costs. We were looking at possibly paying back the general fund for funds that we've had, or possibly folding in illegal dumping. And at this time, it doesn't include any of those costs. We left those out of the cost evaluation criteria for the time being.
Mr. Manager, I think we have a question here. Sure. Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would you prefer questions now or later?
Either way.
Okay. So I'm looking at the RFP overview evaluation, and I wondered in which part of the evaluation includes any reference or to the minority percentage of employees that are being used for this service. I think someone indicated that this is our largest contract, perhaps, and I know with contracts that we let for work to be done, there is a percentage of minority participation, and I wondered in what part of the evaluation is that revealed?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know the answer offhand, but I will get that answer for you before we take final action on this.
Thank you. And then when you find out, it would be interesting to know if, well, I know where the city resides, but the other companies, if they are based here in Peoria or based someplace else, and if the employees that they do provide for this service, do any of them reside within the city of Peoria? What percentage of them reside in the city of Peoria? Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so some of the costs that we had that were included in this contract that we wanted to build in as we ran out some of the cost projections included the city buildings and the downtown riverfront collection. We do currently have those costs. They're paid out of our garbage budget, so we wanted to make sure that we included that. We built in some of the education costs as a newly tracked item because one of the aspects and elements of this program would be trying to build in, based upon the feedback from the public, higher education costs. We also built in our costs of the billing that we have by putting the garbage bills on the county tax bill, and then also the contract administration costs for the city staff that manage the program. So moving forward with that, as we run into those cost projection scenarios, the first item is the City of Peoria's residential trash service. In this, what we did is we wanted to make sure that we were looking at the final proposal that we negotiated back, working and discussing that with Scott Reese and his team. So this includes residential trash service. The City of Peoria proposal that we worked through, which is their alternate proposal, included a recycling cart for all residential units. It would have universal recycling services with every other week collection. It would have weekly seasonal landscape waste collections. And so in 2019, the all-in cost is going to roll up to be about $16.79. In 2025, that cost would be $17.16. And part of the reason for that is this contract is going to go up from 2019 to 2023. In 2023, it's anticipated that the landfill 2 will close and landfill 3 will open. And at that point in time, we'll see an adjustment in the disposal costs at the landfill as PDC takes over the disposal or the control and operations of landfill 3, and then our tipping rates would go down considerably. And then extending that out to 2028, this contract would be $18.79. When we looked at that based upon the revenues that would be coming in to the fund, we estimated that the cash on hand in 2028 would amount to about $6.5 million. So that was the City of Peoria's proposal. Peoria Disposal Company's proposals included the residential trash service. Their alternate proposal that we've been negotiating with them included a subscription-based recycling service with every other week collection. So they've increased the frequency of recycling services, but it's still a subscription service. What it would provide is that if somebody wanted a recycling toter, they would just have to call them, and they would no longer have to put down a $50 deposit. They would be able to come and pick up or get a toter delivered, and they would be able to begin participating in the recycling program. It included the seasonal landscape waste collection with weekly collection of those services. In 2019, that cost was estimated to be $17.07. In 2025, it would be $18.06. In 2028, it would be $19.69. And then the estimate after 10 years of this, that the cash on hand in the fund would be at just under $1 million or at $800,000. We also then began to discuss, as the evaluation team, whether it would be possible for the city and the county, or the city and PDC to provide a hybrid public and private operation of this service, where PDC would continue to provide the trash collection services, and then the City of Peoria Public Works Department would provide recycling and landscape waste services. In this, the first hybrid proposal included universal recycling, but it would also include a rotation of, during the summer months, of every other week. We would go from landscape waste being picked up every other week and recycling services being picked up the other week. So it would rotate that service. That cost was estimated to be $17.23 per household in 2019. It would be $18.16 in 2025, and then $19.81 in 2028. And that the estimated cash on hand, if we were to utilize that service, would be, after 10 years, would be about $1.4 million in the fund. The final option that we looked at was the hybrid of again, another hybrid model, but it would include seasonal, weekly landscape waste collection services. So this was having PDC, again, provide the trash collection services, having the City of Peoria Public Works Department providing recycling and landscape waste services. We would have the universal recycling that would be provided every other week, and then there would be landscape waste that would be seasonally picked up every week as we were to go forward with that. The cost estimates for that would be $17.98 in 2019, $19.06 in 2025, and then $20.79 in 2028. The cost factor for this is a little bit higher. We'd be looking here at a reduction in the budget. We'd have a deficit of $2.5 million if we were to go forward with that after 2028, just simply due to the higher cost of delivering this service. So this is a reflection of what those costs would roll up and look like in 2019. You can see that the City of Peoria's households per month was $8.90. You see that PDC's alternate proposal was $11.15 with the credit for education. And then it's $10.26 for the hybrid, and then $11.01 for the every week hybrid model. Now, what's different and why these numbers change overall as they roll up is the cost of disposal. As the city absorbs the cost of disposal and then has to manage the administration, with the incentives that PDC was providing in their alternative for residential waste collection, the city would still have to absorb the cost of paying that toter contract for the first couple of years, and that's built into the higher disposal and administration costs for the first year and the second year of this contract with PDC, if the city were to do this solely on their own. But then eventually those costs would come down, and then it would move on from there. So we wanted to put together just a quick graph to kind of show you what we're really talking about here. And I'm going to start from the bottom and I'm going to work my way up. The most affordable proposal was the city's alternate proposal, which, as I mentioned, puts $6.5 million in the bank of the fund over the 10-year period of time. That's the yellow line that's at the very bottom of this graph. So you can see how the costs move up, and then after 2022, when the new landfill opens up, there's a reset. Those costs drop down, and then they move up on an annual basis. Some of the costs are built in. We annualize them at 3% a year. PDC, as part of their negotiations, if they take over, which are the top three lines, doing the trash collection, it would be at 2.75% a year of a cost escalator. So the lowest yellow bar is the city's proposal. The blue bar would be the PDC proposal. And you can see that the blue bar would be the next most affordable option that we have. It shows that you would stay under the amount of money that we have that we would be collecting from each household on an annualized basis. The challenge that we have is that, from a revenue standpoint, is that we're only collecting about 91% of our revenues, which is still, I think, a pretty good rate since we've put it on the property tax bill. But we're going to have to go out and start to chase back some of the and try and see if we can't get that collection rate up even higher. The next orange line would be the hybrid model if we were to go to every other week landscape waste collection. And you can see that that's it's slightly higher in cost, but virtually the same as the PDC alternate. And then the gray bar would be the every other week hybrid model that we were looking at as a potential option, in which we would provide universal recycling services, and then we would have the weekly landscape waste pickup. So this, and then the green bar at the top is simply the current garbage fees as they're laid out over the next 10 years. So from a recommendation standpoint, really this is probably the area that we want to talk about the most with you this evening. If the city of Peoria, and we talked a little bit about this in our recommendation in the memo that we included in the packet for you, if we were to get into the business completely, where the city was providing the services, we would be meeting the base level of the base proposal that we tried to lay out for you. In fact, we would, based upon the negotiations that occurred over the last couple of months, we've enhanced the landscape waste pickup to be what we currently have today. But it's also the highest risk that we're facing, because it's the city's actually getting in completely into a new business. We would be moving completely into this operation. We would be basically creating a new $8 million business unit of the city that we would have to manage and operate. But it is the lowest cost. So there's a trade-off that's there with that we would be looking at with this. If we were to go back and say we want to continue in the service that we have with Peoria Disposal, you're really looking at a service that the public knows, the public understands, the public has a good comfort level with. So there's really very little risk with us staying with Peoria Disposal Company. It is a lower cost. It's not the lowest cost. It is a lower cost with us providing that service. But the difference is it is still not providing what the public wanted and what we had heard from you as the council of trying to look to see if we can't expand to universal recycling. It does move closer to that. It provides every other week recycling services, and that's something that we could certainly say that we're moving in that direction of trying to get to uniform or universal recycling services. As we looked at the hybrid models, there's two, I think, things that we wanted to point out here. The first was that the every other week landscape waste service is a model that we think is affordable. It lowers the city's risk. It lowers our costs. But it does provide what I think some people might in the community think would be a takeaway, that it would be that we're reducing services in the summer months by saying that we're now only going to collect landscape waste every other week instead of every week. And then the last model, the hybrid, where we provide weekly landscape waste services, is, again, a lower risk because the city isn't completely providing that service. But it is the highest cost. It is a higher cost, but it does meet all of the elements of the proposal as we've tried to lay out for you in the RFP. So as staff looked at this, and we grappled with it because of the funding model, but we did feel that we wanted to make the recommendation that we look at the hybrid approach, and that we look at the hybrid approach for a couple of reasons. First, we still get the benefit of having PDC providing the trash collection services that the public knows, the public trusts, and the public understands. But it allows the city to step into the recycling services and also the landscape waste services at a level that the public understands when it comes to the seasonality of our landscape waste program, but also providing universal recycling services, which is what the community, in the feedback that we received from the public, said that they were looking for. So I think from our perspective, while this is the highest cost service, we think that this is an approach that provides the maximum value for our residents. It allows us to work with PDC, and allows our employees in the Public Works Department to provide a certain amount of check and balance on the services that we're receiving from Peoria Disposal, as we will have to start doing some route planning with them and working with them if we were to go forward with providing recycling pickup and then landscape waste pickup. So I think from a staff perspective, as we're here tonight to talk about this and before we finalize a recommendation to bring back to you for council, this would be the approach that we would look at recommending. And at this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions. And Josh is here from FOTH to help answer questions as well.
Yeah, Josh is here, Public Works Director is here. We have representatives from PDC as well. So any questions that we have for any area of that, we would be available to try to answer tonight. I have council members here first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few questions for Mr. Manager. What is their current property tax collection rate?
So the current property tax collection rate is about 97, 98%.
97, 98%. Now, this bill here we're talking about, with the garbage bill, comes with the property tax bill, correct? So why are you using 91% versus 97% collection?
Well, because we have some houses that are currently well, if they're vacant, they're not paying, and if they're not paying their property taxes, we do get a certain amount of properties every year, 2 or 3%, that aren't paying their property tax bill, and so that's not rolling up. And then somebody could opt to just pay their property taxes and not pay their garbage bill, and that's happened as part of the service, and then we have to go out and try and chase that down.
The next three questions is very similar, but I'm just trying to clear up my mind a little bit. Our sales tax collection rate versus the Greater Peoria Sanitary District rate or the water company rate, collection rate for all three, which one is the best? I'm kind of unfair. I don't know if you have those numbers or not, but do you know what their collection rates are?
I don't, but we can certainly ask them, and then we can certainly try and get those answers for you.
Okay, thank you. On the I'm looking at the memorandum of March 13 we received last week, I believe, on the payback to general fund. I'm reading that any overage amount that we would get in a collection of the garbage fees, it says here just may be paid to the general fund. Can we have stronger language? Personally, I would prefer some that must be paid. Because, I mean, we all know at work sometimes that money might be used somewhere else. I think it's very important that any money, that extra money we're collecting should be back to the general fund. So I'm not sure it's possible or not, but I'd like to see much stronger language when we talk about that. Another question, seems to me like everybody wants a 3% raise every year for inflation. Last 10 years, I'm not an economist, but I know the last 10 years the inflation was non-existent or way, way below 2%. I think we need to sharpen our pencil a little bit with these proposals and maybe have, a 1% increase or even a floating rate if possible. Because, I mean, if there's no inflation, I'm not sure why we should pay more money if nothing's going up. I received a fair amount of calls last fall under the landscape waste collection. Is this a floating schedule? Because we never know from one year to another how long the summer is going to last or the fall. And like this year, it was pretty warm. Leaves are coming down much later. Is that any way, any way to negotiate that in the contract, basically?
We could certainly negotiate the time frames in the contract to have those adjusted. And I believe that in this contract we negotiated. Well, I'm trying to remember, Josh. Do you remember what we had in terms of the start and stop date for landscape waste services in this contract?
So originally what we had is March 15th through December 15th. Those were the dates. So we did have an extended season. I think it's 38, 39 weeks is what we decided.
So we did have an extended season this year. Thank you, sir. And one last question. One of your slides, there's no numbers here, but I would go to the cost projection for the scenarios for PDC service. Where it was 2019 $17.07 with an estimated cash on hand of $800,000.
Yes.
I'd like to understand this slide a little bit better. 2019, the monthly cost will be $18 a month, correct?
Yes, and that's also assuming that we're at a 91% collection rate.
That's where I was. Okay. Thank you very much for that answer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I had Councilmember Whaler next.
Comparing the private entity bids here, you have a scenario where if they undershot the runway, that's on them. If our own internal works undershot the runway, that's on us. I'd like a pretty good understanding of how we came up with these numbers, getting into a business that we're not currently in. What was the process that was followed to decide what our numbers were going to be for this bid and how we would get this program off the ground? It concerns me, you know, from my previous life being in supply chain, that if a supplier came in and well undershot the competition, that there might be something missed in the proposal. And I want to make very certain here that that's not the case, and that we don't end up with the taxpayers on the hook for a big error here, considering this isn't something that we've been involved in before, and we don't have the assets currently to perform the service, and we don't have the people to perform the service. So we are on uncharted territory and taking on a lot here, and to be well under, I want to make darn certain that we know what we're doing.
Thank you. Definitely understand your concern, Councilman. The process we went through internally at Public Works, because we were set up with a firewall between the RFP response team and the review team, we had a consultant on board, and we actually went out and followed PDC trucks that are out there today and did route audits. And so we documented how much time it took for each stop, and then looked at the routes and looked at the number of pickups for each day. And then we went back and we equalized that to some degree to try to figure out how can we better utilize or distribute those loads. And we figured out that we could get by with a certain number of trucks and people for garbage collection and then recycling and landscape. And then we solicited quotes for those garbage trucks and what those would look like and the landscaping, and got those prices, put those into it. The number of people or personnel we needed, we looked at those plus all their costs or their overhead costs. We pulled that directly out of the city's financial reports that are online for employee costs. So we had a factor in there for retirement, work comp, all your typical overhead costs that you would have, and we broke that down per employee, depending if they were a union employee for the waste collectors or supervisors, and how we needed that, and put that number together. And then we actually looked at, some of this would be capital cost to construct a facility out of the public works side, so we factored in that capital cost for construction. We took the vehicles and the capital cost for construction for the facility, and we talked to a bonding company to give us a 10-year amortization for that so that we could figure that into our costs. Plus, we added some additional dollars to that so that we could set up a capital sinking fund to replace our trucks. Because part of the RFP was that your trucks had to be 7 years or newer. So part of our proposal that we were looking at was not going in and buying 22 new trucks or 27 brand new trucks. It was to buy a couple used ones, a couple 2-year-old trucks, a couple 4-year-old trucks, and some brand new ones so that we could start our recapitalization from day one, and that also helped us on our replacement as we worked down the line. So we got that number, we put those in there, and then we put in a contingency line item because definitely nervous about where we were at and understanding where the market was. And so we put in a contingency factor in there, and then we back that into what our monthly rate was.
What type of cost sharing do you see with the current maintenance department that we have, and how do you baseline things like how many tires you're going to have to go through with? Because I assume we have very differing places on the spectrum, from vehicles that run nonstop versus the vehicles that are just as at will or at need use.
So our proposal was to set it up into an enterprise fund so that it was anything for garbage was strictly restricted for solid waste, And then that would, if we buy tires or buy vehicles, that strictly comes out of that enterprise fund. It doesn't come anywhere else, so we can segregate it from the rest of the operation, as well as the people. So we had mechanics that would be strictly charged to that. Ideally, we keep track of their time, and we do that today with engineers. Our engineers are charged to capital projects. So as they work on projects, they're charged to them. That's how we would keep track of mechanics time. So if they're working on a police vehicle, that time is charged to the general fund, versus if they're working on a garbage truck, that would be charged to the garbage fund.
Okay, thank you.
Did we utilize an engineering consultant to help us put this bid together? Okay, thank you. I had Councilmember Jensen up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I want to commend Mr. Urich and Mr. Gaypart for all your work on this. I think it's been tremendous. I appreciate all the public input that's been involved in that. We've spent a lot of time with, I think, at least 3 policy sessions over the last year with surveys, and so I really appreciate that. I think you've come forward with some really good alternatives and proposals. And I'd like to thank Mr. Reese for his work on his proposal, and also PDC, our current providers, for working so closely with the city to try to get us where we want to be. It's no secret that I've been a real proponent of universal recycling, so I appreciate everyone's efforts for that, and I'm glad to see that that's a major component, or at least close to universal recycling, of the recommended proposals here tonight. I think Mr. Reese sat down. I have a couple questions for him. Sorry. And I know you had, the mayor just asked you, and you responded that you had an engineer consultant work with you on the bid. I assume, but I guess I shouldn't, did you compare or benchmark with other cities that provide their own waste pickup and recycling?
Yes. Our biggest comparable, or where we used a lot of, was information from, was Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Okay. And what are their comparable rates?
I guess I should clarify. We didn't really look at rates. It was more about route times and pickups, because that all drives your cost.
What about any comparisons with cities more in line with the size of Peoria and the number of households that we serve?
As the response team, no, we did not.
Okay. I may have a couple more questions for you, but this one is directed, I think, to the city manager. I want to make sure I'm understanding what you showed us tonight. In one of your earlier slides, you put the phased solid waste fee increases for 18 through 21. And that's currently what you had projected under our current contract, what the rate increases would be?
So if we look at this graph, well,
no, I'm actually talking about the early slide. Okay.
But that green line at the top is the solid waste fee. So that shows you that. Council has approved a fee increase to go $1 per year from 2018 to 2021. So that's
right.
all. That's all we know as of that date. So when we built that in, looking at from 2021 on, we did not assume. I didn't want to assume that there was any fee increase as part of this discussion yet. Council may. That is your purview to decide if you want to look at a fee increase as part of the budget. But we didn't build that in as we were having this discussion.
So then, along those lines, my next question is then for the proposals. The city's proposal actually comes underneath those projected increases that we had already approved, correct? And so does PDC's. Is that correct? At least for 2019.
Yes, it does. And I'll jump back. And so for the city of Peoria, we looked at it over a 10-year period of time and looked at the cash in the garbage fund. And we would have an increase of cash in that fund over 10 years to $6.5 million. When we looked at PDC during that same period of time, it was about $800,000. So it was still cash positive after a 10-year period of time.
Okay, and the initial, I guess the first year of this contract, for which would be 2019, is not higher than what we had already approved.
No, it's not. With that caveat
Right.
of the 91% collection rate that would pull that revenue down.
Okay. Hang on one second. And I think some of this, I just want to, since we're having this meeting, and I think more people may be listening, since it's a Tuesday night rather than a Saturday afternoon, I think you went through what will happen with regards to education and recycling. Are we going to look at the habits as we recycle more? And can you explain how all of that will work?
Sure. One of the elements that we built into this was budgeting in the solid waste fund to do education work. And as part of the negotiations with PDC, as they were looking at their proposal, they've offered what amounts to, I think it was $1 per household per year, so about just under $40,000 to be built in to help us to support that education effort. But we built into the costs some additional costs that we knew that we would have to have as part of the education program. So we're anticipating that the fund is going to be spending some money to do more education and outreach on recycling, on trash collection, on yard waste pickup, all of those items.
And then that education and research, will that help us then in the future be more innovative?
Hopefully it will encourage people to do more recycling. Hopefully it will encourage people, to understand what it's like to have to put the trash out and comply with using the toters as much as we possibly can, and to raise awareness of the program, which is what we're ultimately trying to do with it.
Okay. This question is directed to you, Director Reese. When you look, does Minneapolis do both recycling and waste pickup?
My understanding is yes.
Okay. Are you familiar, or do you know of any cities that have a hybrid model, like the one that city manager's recommending? I'm curious.
Maybe I'll turn over to Josh to answer that question. He might be able to answer that.
I forgot.
Yes, there are several communities that do have hybrid approaches. There's many ways that communities handle their solid waste services. Some have all private, some have all public, some have a mixture of both, some have multiple privates in town. So it is been seen in several other communities, this approach.
And then, this can be directed to either Director Urich or to you, Josh. How much risk do you think is minimized by doing, you said that's one of your reasons for recommending this hybrid model, even though it's a little bit more expensive. Can you give us a ballpark on how much risk we would be minimizing if we went this route?
The lion's share of the cost, 70% of the cost of this contract would be trash collection services, because that's the weekly service that comes out. I think when we looked at it, that it was 30 to 35% would be what we would be looking at for the recycling and the yard waste component. So you're not going in 100% into a new business endeavor. This would be a partial movement. Scott, if you could just, or Director Reese, if you could offer up the number of trucks you would be looking to purchase to move into providing the yard waste, and if we were to do the hybrid model, what you would be looking at purchasing on that side.
If we did, I believe, and I have to go back to verify for sure, but I think it's 12 trucks if we were looking at the every week collection. If we did the alternative of every other week, I think we had reduced that down to 8. But I have to walk back there and verify.
The hybrid that you're recommending is recycling every other week and landscaping every other week?
The recommendation would be that we look at providing the weekly yard waste pickup. Because of I think when we started talking about it as an evaluation team, the concern was that would be viewed as a takeaway, that the public, if we pulled back from that service, that might be viewed as something that because there is a high satisfaction level that people have with the current services.
Is that the more expensive hybrid model then?
It is the more expensive hybrid model, though. So that, jumping back here, what that would mean is that we would be looking at over a 10-year period that we'd have a $2.5 million deficit in the fund, which would likely mean one of two things. One, we have to try and get that collection rate up from 91%, try and move that up. And if we can get that up at 93, 94%, that goes away. Or we're going to have to look at some sort of fee increase in the out years in order to look at this and balance that out.
And I do think your point about yard waste is probably true. I'm already receiving texts from constituents who don't want to lose their weekly yard waste. So I think that is an important consideration. I think that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councilmember Ruckriegel next.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And City Manager Yerk and your team, thank you for actually this whole process. I think starting from our dialogue a couple of weeks ago into the packet, I think that this is some great and valuable information, not only for us, but for the city as well. A couple of questions. If we can go back actually to the slide that we have up. Which one? Or the one we have up right there, the $2.5 million deficit. Can we get what these numbers need to be able to at least have this at a break even? I think it's important that with the financial condition that we see ourselves in right now as a city and then going forward, that we would kind of understand, I think, what these numbers ought to be if there were no other added increases there. And if we do that, it's just a break even. That might be the easiest to be able to compare there.
Sure.
And then a couple of questions on the evaluation piece, and this might be better, I guess, geared towards this a little bit. Just for my own sake, to kind of educate myself a little bit, can you kind of walk me through a couple of these categories? Compliance with state and county. I guess I was a little surprised with kind of the swing in there. Waste management, I think, kind of operates in Illinois and has a substantial footprint in. PDC, it looks like, has scored very high on this. In the city, we kind of find ourselves in the middle, leaning towards high. Can you talk a little bit about compliance with the state and the county? Because it seems like that almost ought to be an immediate check.
One thing about the evaluations, too, which may help a little bit. We did a best score is 10, a best score is 7, a best is 4, a best is 1. So they may have all been in compliance with everything. It was just that was what the raters had decided what they felt was the best. The county does require a hall license. So yes, everyone said that they would get those licenses. I think that's really what we have with the state and county. It's just that was the one that they picked over everyone else.
And on the qualifications segment, can you tell me a couple of things, I guess, that would have been looked at in that category? Kind of what the stipulations were, or what the thought processes were as they were scoring those?
I think the qualifications piece looks towards contracts of the similar size, staff, other operations, and references.
Okay. And then on customer service, I guess it's been interesting for me, my time around the horseshoe here. The one contract which I probably hear least about, which I think is a good thing, is probably the current service that we have. It seems like if there's a sort of a glitch or an incident, that it gets taken care of fairly quickly. Can you talk about where this customer service comes from? Because it seems like PDC scored very well. Waste management has scored pretty well. The city, we see ourselves a little bit higher there. Can you just kind of help me, I guess, some thought process there as well? It's good to see. I just kind of want to understand how maybe we see ourselves maybe pushing that customer service line a little bit better than maybe what's currently out there.
Yeah, I think I think that in that instance, some of the evaluators may have looked at that and said that they thought that in the city's approach to the services, that they thought that they would be superior when it came to customer service.
Okay. And in our conversations when we're talking about less risky, more risky, high risk, are are we just talking from a financial perspective on being able to get into the marketplace of providing the service? Or are we also talking about, I think, moving the needle? There's probably not another contract that affects more directly, I think, the average life of the citizen, because every week it's the one thing that we need is trash removal service. And I applaud the fact that we're looking at making sure that landscaping waste is pretty well every week, because I think that we're either going to have a lot of toters go up if we go to every other week, or we're going to see a lot of bags that get ripped with grass, and we're going to see a lot of accumulation otherwise. Can you just talk a little bit about that risk assessment? Is it all financial? Is it kind of what we could lose if we switch from?
I think there's, from my perspective, and I'll speak from me personally, I think that there's obviously, if we're moving into a new business, there's some operational risk. Did we fully plan and fully vet everything to think about anything that might pop up? Did we, are we 100% sure that this is, and you can never be 100% sure, but have we really looked at this to make sure that operationally that we've got everything covered to be able to deliver this service, and to make sure that we're picking up 39,782 households every week, and that we're hitting that mark at all times? And I think that's probably on the operational side, making sure that we didn't miss something as well. It goes to Councilman Euler's questions, I think, that he was asking Director Reese. So,
and I guess that comes back a little bit to my thought is we're looking at if we look just, and not the hybrid selections, if we look at the base bids, the city, we're looking at coming in on 55 cents on the dollar compared to a PDC, and that seems to be a big gap for getting into an industry that we don't know a lot about. So it sounds like that risk assessment might be taken in there from what you're saying. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I do have a couple of questions. I'm sorry, you're going to have to come back up, Director Reese. Sorry about that. You might as well just take a seat close. So my first question is, and Councilwoman Jensen got to some of this when we were asking about municipalities, cities, or towns who we compared to. My question is, are there any cities or towns within Central Illinois that that city or town collects its own trash?
Yes, Pekin and East Peoria both collect their own solid waste.
And we've compared ourselves as far as our service that we could provide as a city to them, I'm sure. Okay. And that was factored into our number.
Yes. So our job as the respondent team was we just tried to figure out the most efficient service that was comparable or that met the RFQ requirements to submit on.
Okay. In the communication, and this may be the manager, there's a phrase, the control provided by the city would be outweighed by the higher cost. That's in the communication. What are you referring to by the control? What is the control that the city would be providing that would be outweighed by the higher cost? Because as I'm looking at your projections, you indicate in 10 years the cash on hand, if the city collected ourselves, would be $6.5 million. But the cash on hand with the alternate scenario, the higher one is a negative 2.5, so that's a $9 million swing?
I think what we meant in that was within the hybrid model, the hybrid approach of providing some of that control over a portion of the services, not entirely looking at it as if the city were to municipalize the entire operation. I was looking at it in light of the recommendation of the hybrid approach. So,
where the city would be collecting the landscape waste,
yard waste and recycling.
And so, in reading through the recommendation, it didn't sound like we had very much confidence in our ability, the city's ability to do any of this if we're recommending something where we're splitting that with someone else. So I wonder, So even though the city would be, the cost would be less to the city, which would mean the cost would be less to our residents, and which means that we wouldn't have to have the stepped up increase in waste costs coming from our residents. We don't feel our ability to do this, we're not comfortable enough with our ability to do this, that we would prefer the alternate. Is that what I'm reading into that?
Yes, I mean, I think that as we looked at that, we have a service that's currently, the trash service that's being provided is I think, the residents are very satisfied with it, and I think that we wanted to recognize that, and that's why we wanted to look at the hybrid approach. I think that there's some control elements with the hybrid approach that allows us to in essence be a check on PDC and to see if you know, as we're providing landscape waste services and recycling services, can we do it at a consistent cost and manner as they're providing the trash services, and looking at that with running similar routes and the coordination with that. So I think there's some opportunities there for us that provide some additional benefit. I think the benefit of having the staff that would be running the trucks doing yard waste in the season that we would have for yard waste, and then having them available to help us when we need snow plowing assistance is another benefit that we need to look at and say that there is another additional benefit that of having us being in that yard waste program that we need to think about.
Well, I don't dispute the fact that the city's got enough on our hands that we can't take on this whole process, so you won't get an argument out of me on that. Director, you indicated that as a good customer should, you audited, if you will, your service provider. And you audited them by following them around, determining if they were going, what path they were going through, how much time it was taking. And after you did your audit of your service provider, you came back and you determined that if we were doing it ourselves, there would be the cost would be less. And so if we proceed with an alternate plan, are you going to share with your service provider how you think they can do the job better, which would cost less, in which case some of the increase that's going to be resulting from the alternate plan may be able to be backed off because you will share with them your efficiencies that you found when you followed them around?
I think our intention on the hybrid approach, we're definitely going to have to work with PDC. And they have been a good partner in the existing contract that we have, because we need to coordinate currently landscape waste, recycling, garbage is all collected on the same day. And we'd have to make sure that we do that with them also. So we definitely would share with them how we were looking at doing it. I would anticipate that there would probably be some negotiation going back and forth, because they have a plan on how they would attack that, and we'd have to come to an agreement on how that would look.
I would like to have some summary of that communication to determine if they were able to see your efficiencies and decided to adopt them, or if perhaps because they've been doing it for much longer, they determined that what you saw as efficiencies were something that been there, done that, didn't work. So if you could report back what that looks like and if there was any cost savings as a result. Mr. Manager, is that possible?
Once we have that conversation with PDC,
Thank you.
I think we can. Yeah.
Okay. So I want to proceed over to the fourth document dated March the 20th. It's labeled, it's numbered page 34, where you did an analysis of the vacant homes and suspended services. So I appreciate someone taking a look at that, because that's something that I bring up all the time. And in the end of that paragraph, you read, however, any type of credit to a property owner for estimated disposal costs will raise the costs assumed by other property owners in the system. I'd like to have that quantified. Raise the cost, where would the extra cost come from, and if this is a process that you're instituting, I would imagine if it's if you go 17 times 12, if it's less than that to a vacant property owner, or perhaps someone who suspends their service for 12 weeks, that it may be the cost may be less. So I just like to have that statement quantified, not right here, because I'm sure you can't do that right here. Because when you think about it, I wondered, are abandoned homes where people have walked away because they let it go back to the bank, and the bank is not maintaining a lot of these properties sometimes, are those built for trash collection? Yes?
They are.
Okay. Are homes for sale, the homes that are built and not yet sold, they're built as well?
Yes.
Okay. Homes where people have, and I think this is what got to the suspended service, when someone is ill and perhaps they go there in some type of rehab center for a number of weeks. That's what we're talking about with the suspended service.
They're still billed for the service.
Or the number of people who leave the town for maybe 3 months in the winter. I wish I could be one of them, but anyway, those are the ones under the suspended service that we're looking at?
Yes.
Thank you.
I have Councilmember Riggenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I, too, want to thank the city manager, Public Works, PDC, FOTH for all their efforts on this. And I think this council made the decision last year that we were going to take this slowly and make sure we do this right, being that this is our biggest contract. And I think we're showing that again tonight. I apologize for being a little bit late, so I just have to ask one question, Mr. Manager, about the PDC incentives that expire next week. Was that discussed before I got here? Or?
It was. I'll jump back and I'll show you the slide that was here. We had, these were the incentives that PDC has offered as part of their proposal that would be included in both their service if they were to provide trash collection services, or in the hybrid approach as well. So,
and that is the correct date. Those go away on March 28th.
On March 28th, they would go away. That is correct.
Well, speaking for myself, I'm certainly not prepared to make a decision of this magnitude in the next 7 days. So, that would be a request, perhaps, as you continue dialogue with them, if there's an extension on that, or if that is a drop-dead number, because that will obviously influence the rest of the discussion going forward, I think. But the reason we moved the contract effective date so far out was so that we could take the time to do this judiciously. So I don't want to, those dollar amounts really catch your attention, no doubt about it, but we need to make sure that we're still working through this for the long term. A couple questions on the recycling piece. I think we're coming in the right direction on this. But if the city does this, or if PDC does this with the subscription-based model, there would no longer be a $50 deposit. Did I understand that correctly?
In the discussions that we've had with PDC, there would no longer be a $50 deposit for new customers that would come on board.
Would need to request the recycling toter.
Correct.
And that would basically be the same model with us. You would have to request it.
No, what we're looking at, if the city were to provide the service, or under the hybrid approach, is that it would be universal. We would work to provide toters. There's some grants that are out there, and there's actually some zero interest loans that we're looking at that would allow us to provide those toters citywide, and then start the recycling service.
And there would be no delivery fee for those or anything. What about those of us that have paid that $50 deposit? How do we go about getting that back?
That's a different discussion, I think, with the company about that. I think that in the discussions we've had, they asked if they could continue to hang on to that $50 deposit. Because
that was clearly, I don't want to say sold to the public, but that was presented as a deposit, not as a registration fee. So.
Well, and if we're moving towards if the city is moving into providing universal toters, then people that have a PDC recycling toter could return them back to PDC.
I would have to say, going into this, I didn't have a lot of, I was not expecting the Public Works proposal to be as aggressive as it was, let me put it that way. And I think Director Reese and your team has done a heck of a job, but I would concur with many of the comments made by Councilman Euler that we need to make sure that there's substance to those, and that's the kind of thing that I think that will add to this taking more than another week or two. So I'm very intrigued by what the internal team has come up with, but making sure that we understand how that looks in 10 years, I think, is something that we need to be able to wrap our arms around. And great dialogue this evening. I think it was Councilman Reckriegel asked to see the hybrid model put to a break-even point, and I would ask for that as well, so that we could see with that hybrid model, which appears to be a very attractive approach, what would the actual fee need to be so we don't have those red numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Euler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilwoman Moore reminds us on a regular basis about the vacant properties that are getting service or not using service that they're paying for. And I'm somewhat concerned about the impact of universal recycling, and wouldn't that exponentially increase the amount of services paid for that are not being utilized in the city? I definitely support us increasing the frequency of recycling pickup, but I'm concerned that we are really going to get the bang for our buck by having the expectation that everyone's going to be doing it and paying for it when we aren't actually seeing that utilized. And then another thing that's really sticking in my mind here is I heard regarding the proposal in buying the used trucks and getting into some of these more aged, like potentially 7-year-old trucks here. I don't run my car all day long, and it's 4 years old now, and it's really starting to show some of its age, and I'm concerned what the impact is going to be of buying trucks that are getting relatively close to a decade old, and how we're going to plan for a high level of maintenance on a vehicle that runs all the time, and when we would turn around and plan to replace those.
Okay. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Manager, I'm sure I've missed it somewhere in all of the pages that we have, but under the hybrid approach that you're recommending, does it show, and maybe this is what's going to come out in the break-even, I'm looking for the cost that the city will incur to pick up the landscape and recycling. Is that in here somewhere and I just missed it? Yep. Under your hybrid?
So the, going the wrong way. So the landscape waste cost and the recycling cost in the every week recycling on the far right would be $2.32 per household per month for recycling pickup, and then $2.42 per household per month for landscape waste pickup.
And we've determined that that will cover the city cost?
That would cover the city cost and allow us to provide that service for every week landscape waste pickup.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing any lights right now, which doesn't mean we're finished, but I do have a couple of comment cards, and I'm assuming that they would like to address the council during this discussion on this particular part of the policy session versus at the end of the meeting. So if Mr. McGinnis or Mr. Matt Coulter would like to do that now, I assume you'd wanted to talk. Okay, floor would be open for comments, and maybe stay there for a second, because whatever you say may generate a couple questions. Thank you.
Good evening. Matt Coulter. Do you need address tonight? you want address for the record?
We have it. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to be part of the RFP process. It's been a good process. Also, we want to thank you for being your vendor of this contract for the past 7 years. Just a few comments, and then I'm going to address some of the questions that were asked. PDC is the most qualified and lowest responsible bidder and the lowest risk to the city of Peoria and the taxpayers. Our family has been picking up trash in Peoria since 1928. Our longevity in this very competitive industry speaks for itself. PDC has 101 employees that live in the city. Our payroll for these employees in Peoria exceeds $6 million annually. PDC has a high satisfaction rate with the city of Peoria in handling this contract, and the city's own survey validates our customer service record and compliance. PDC has incentives on the table of over $800,000 in current contract savings, and those make up the CART agreement and the CPI forgiveness. That does not include the $450,000 that's also an incentive. That $800,000 equates to a savings of 80 cents per unit per month over the next 2 years in your costs that are projected. PDC's proposal also, I think it's important to state that our proposal for what's on the table with Alternative 1 starts in October of 2018. Now keep in mind, everybody is paying the increased fee of $17 this year. So our every other week recycling program, as presented, starts almost 6 months sooner than the hybrid approach. Also, PDC's yard waste program, and this is a clarification, the current program is 36 weeks. Our alternate proposal goes back to the old contract, which is 39 weeks. And people love the 39 weeks. Okay, so it would go March 15th through December 15th of one of your most, the feedback we get, that's one of the most popular programs you give residents. Peoria Public Works has no waste collection experience. Any award of services to Public Works would be giving work to the least experienced vendor out of everybody that responded to your RFP. City staff claims it can do the work for a third of the cost established of city-run programs in Bloomington and Normal, which they are now charging. Both Bloomington and Normal recently raised their fees close to $30 per month. And Peoria thinks they can do it for less than $10 a home. Something is wrong with the pricing submitted. A local example is the Peoria Park District. For years, they collected their own solid waste, but decided to outsource to PDC last year. Outsourcing saved them money and allowed them to use their resources to be focused on their core values and their mission. City staff and FOTH miscalculated or undercalculated $250,000 in landscape waste disposal cost in the packet released Friday. What other major costs are missing from the city's bid and analysis? How much risk is the city council willing to take? With the current recycling markets, processing fees would be estimated at a $72,000 expense. Are you sure that those costs were reflected in your pricing? If PDC's numbers are wrong, we will absorb the loss. If the city is wrong, and I am confident their numbers are flawed, the taxpayer will be on the hook again. PDC is a no risk and the best option for the city. Now I'm going to, if you don't mind, I'd like to talk about some of the comments that have been made. Councilwoman Moore, on the minority hiring, we are currently at 18%. The yard waste collection I talked about. Currently, we start April 1st is kind of the date, depending on what Monday that falls on. So that's going to be starting up here in 2 weeks. And that program, the way it runs right now under the current contract, ends about December 7th. Subscription recycling, contrary to popular belief, is universal. If a resident calls us for a cart under this alternate program, a cart is delivered to their home. Now, contrary to popular belief, not everybody wants to recycle at the curbside, and not everybody wants to recycle. And keep that in mind. A lot of residents in this town, believe it or not, use the county drop-off locations at the Kroger off Sterling and then North Knoxville. And honestly, a lot of those residents that use those would probably not participate in curbside. In fact, they currently don't. And it's not because of $50 deposit. A lot of those people we have talked to, that's because they want to get out of their house. It's a way for them to do, more recycling, do more for the community, and get out and see people. So just keep that in mind. And I also want to talk about, our industry experience. We have 58 municipal contracts. This is our job to pick up trash, recycling, and yard waste throughout central Illinois and also Missouri. Most of the recycling programs we have a couple contracts where people can just sign up for recycling. And again, contrary to popular belief, and I'll give you an example of one. We have a contract in Rantoul, Illinois, about 4,000 homes, 4,000 residents. Trash and recycling is included in their costs currently, and 38% of those residents recycle. The cost includes recycling. We help promote the campaign with the city, and only 38% of those residents recycle. So just want to bring that stat to your decision. I also have a couple of handouts, if we can do so. Two things I'm going to hand out. And related to the cost projection, if you could bring up that slide of the City of Peoria, PDC's alternate, and the hybrids. So I don't know who can pass these out, but what we have done based on the incentives, we've actually put together what the incentive value is over a 6-year contract to what the per unit cost is. And it will actually show you that PDC's revenue, the alternate one, is the low bid amongst all the options.
Thank you.
One other handout we'd like to pass out. We did submit this in our pricing. And just a point of clarification, the incentives have been on the table since we proposed turned in the RFP on November 9th. So all the incentives have been on the table since November 9th. So the other thing we did is, as part of our response and working with city manager and staff, is that we put together a little item called an infographic, and it shows you the economic value of PDC and the economic impact of PDC in Peoria. So I'll pass that out as well. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Mr. Coulter, one of the things that I was going to ask Mr. Gabehart, and I may ask him for his response as well, but relating to what you were talking about with Danville, or was it Danville or Rantoul? Rantoul being 38%. We're at, what, 25? And while I totally embrace the recycling, we have two big toters in my household, and I guess my question is along the lines of what is it that we can do? I mean, obviously we have an education component to this, but what is it that we can do? How do we incentivize more people to recycle if they're not recycling now? Because clearly this is an added cost to the whole system, and a limited number of people are utilizing that. One of the graphs showed 3 and 4 residents would support increasing the frequency. 2 and 3 would be willing to pay for that. So you do see a drop off of people that aren't going to want to pay for that extra service. But I guess I'm getting to the help me understand, because this is your business, and Foth knows too. There's a dilemma here of how much we can drive more people to participate in the recycling to help it be more beneficial for the community? I don't know what that is, and I'm asking you.
Well, I think just social norms in general, and also education, and I can just tell it with younger kids coming out of college, new hires that we have. They expect recycling in offices. A little bit older generation, they don't expect it. So it is changing, and it's a cultural change that's going on. And you got to keep in mind, Central Illinois typically has not had a lot of opportunities for recycling. So I think the more it's available, the more you're going to see it. But you got to keep in mind, don't underestimate how popular those drop-offs, I've mentioned this for years, how popular those drop-offs are in the city. And they are used by everybody I know that are even involved in the recycling program we offer. Even with every other week recycling, you're still going to have people in the city of Peoria use the drop-off containers. And it just, the thing I like, Mayor, about the education piece, we actually took this from something we've seen in the industry about us, putting skin in the game with the city and being part of the education. I think it's a good thing that the city, they have the means to do it a little bit better than we do. Social media, and you guys can promote the program, the whole city contract better than we can. And I think that's the one thing I like about our education component on the table.
Mr. Gabehart, do you have an observation on this?
I would say one thing that's guaranteed is that every community is a little different in how you can approach this to incentivize. We can have an example locally with Morton. They have an extremely high recycle rate. They have pay-as-you-throw, but much as Mr. Coulter had stated, it's as a cultural change happens, and we even saw it in our survey, the younger, I think 45 and under, had a higher want for more recycling, where, it really mirrors what you said on that. So, and again, every community is different, but the first thing is to have a dedicated source to that education and to attack it, as we've really tried to promote on this.
Well, I don't think we can be lost on that. I know we talked about this last time the contract came around many years ago, and I haven't seen a really big corresponding increase in the recycling customers that I think we'd like to see over the years. So I appreciate that effort to continue that, and I think we really need to put much more focus on that. Councilman Reckriegel, did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I don't know if this is maybe the right time now or later on, but one of the questions that came up in the policy session, and I didn't see it included, it may have gotten forgotten just with putting everything together. So it might be for the county, for the city manager, it might be for Mr. Coulter. Can we talk a little bit about, I guess, the volatility of the recycle market? I think we'd requested maybe a 10-year sort of breakdown on what the past on those were. Being in the restaurant business, we sell grease on the recycling market. I know it kind of goes up and down a little bit. And could we maybe address that on what that does to the overall bids we have in front of us?
Maybe if I could ask Josh to walk through the final portion of the memo, and then we can let Mr. Coulter provide some additional response to that as well, if that would be okay. Okay.
The last memo we had, talking about the history of residential recycle prices, and I just want to preface it too, on these data that we have, we showed the average price for curbside recycled materials for the Pacific Northwest, which is typically one of your higher participation, better quality areas. Very volatile, like many commodities. It is a very volatile industry. Overall, the trend is up, but really the last 5 or 8 or so years, it's really been trending back down. And we showed that with some of our Midwest region recycling price trends, and it's even lower than it is now. But currently, everything is going down. We can have a rather lengthy debate about the Chinese recycling moratorium. I don't even know if moratorium is the right word right now, but that's affected a lot of things. But there was a lot of bad things that were being sent over to them. So, and I think I'll just hand it. We had just talked a little bit about it, Matt, if you want to.
Yeah, related to the current market, because I think it's good to give you what's going on currently. with China's national sword. That's the policy they enacted, where they basically have cut down on the amount of trash that is sent into their country. So it's really impacted rates and being able to get rid of product and export it to them. So right now, if the city would to get into the hybrid approach, use that as the example, so the city would be paying about $20 per ton to get rid of that. Okay, and what you have to remember in PDC's proposal is PDC with in our alternate proposal, PDC assumes the risk of that disposal cost, the recycling. We assume the risk of the landscape waste disposal cost in our alternate proposal. So over the next, let's say it's a 6-year contract, all the risk is assumed by PDC. And that's one of the things that I brought up, is that I'm concerned that if you used the market back in October of 17, when the market was basically, you'd get rid of recycling for $0, the market's changed, now it's 20. Is that in the model going forward? And I think that's a big concern. But you got to keep in mind, we took all the risks because, number one, we know the industry, we know it well, and we think that we're going to still be able to assume that risk in the contract that we've proposed.
Any other questions for Mr. Coulter? Mr. McGinnis, had you as well?
Brian McGinnis. I'm the attorney for PDC Services. I get to do the lawyer thing. Number one, I think we are the lowest responsible bidder. Please keep that in mind. On your rating schedule, we won. On the pricing, we won. Number two, I'd like you to please respect the terms of your RFP. You guys all know somebody from the Coulter family. And during the next couple of weeks, when you're going through this process, now that you have the numbers, you're going to have a lot of questions. Your RFP says that if the Coulters talk to you about the contract, they can be automatically disqualified. So please don't send emails. Please don't send texts with questions. Please don't call them, because I've advised them not to talk to you. We do not want to be disqualified. So please respect the terms of your contract, which I don't agree with those terms. I think they violate our First Amendment rights, but they are what they are for this contract. Finally, I always have to venture into areas I know nothing about, but on this recycling, I think one of the reasons people aren't recycling, nobody buys a newspaper anymore. I mean, Mayor, we've talked about that, and I get 2 newspapers a day. So my recycling thing is full of newspapers. Without newspapers, I wouldn't have anything to throw in there. People with aluminum cans, they're taking them down to Bear. We've got one of the biggest aluminum recycling places. They get paid money for that. They're not throwing those away. So you're going to get some glass and some magazines, but just remember, the volume of newspapers sold in Peoria is drastically down, and I would say 50% of the residents or more don't get a newspaper. So that may be a reason why there isn't that much material. But if you have a question for the Coulters tonight about the contract, tonight's the night to ask it. This is it. So fire away with any more questions.
Councilman Sear?
No question, just a comment for our manager, city manager, Mr. Urick. One of the most frustrated part of this responsibility for me around the horseshoe, being a freshman, is I've inherited a lot of contracts, problems from the past. If I was a betting man, I would think that maybe 3 years from now, this horseshoe will look a little different than the way it looks tonight. What are the chances of negotiating shorter-term contracts, so the next people that are sitting around this horseshoe are not, we might eventually will vote on something that we like, but 3-4 years from now, the new council person might not like it. Anyway, I just want to make a comment. Maybe we want a shorter term because of that.
Well, certainly you could, but what will end up happening, and was part of the discussion that we had with many of the respondents, is that with the requirement that we had in the bid that we had to have new vehicles or vehicles that were under 7 years of age, as you start to capitalize that as part of the project, you have to, it leads itself to a longer timeline. So that's the reason why here.
Thank you. Councilman Euler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Urick, is it standard for our RFPs to have language in them that we don't talk to the people that provide the RFP?
I don't think it's standard per se, although I think that I would not agree with, although I respect his opinion from counsel from PDC, I do not believe the First Amendment is infringed or chilled in any way, especially in light of the fact that we're taking on this enterprise. But that's not language that I've known to be typical.
Well, regardless of whether or not that's the implication, it really ties my back to do my job, which is to do research on these items, and I don't just do my homework on Tuesday night. And so I think that this makes it very difficult to do what I was elected to do if I can't go and get the answers that I need to get. Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, is there going to be potential consternation with the way this RFP came out in the first place, if that were an item that was mutually agreed upon that we could eliminate, since there's going to be additional discussion in the next coming weeks?
I'm not sure at this juncture that I would advise that, but that's something I could look at. But I'm not sure at this late date, if we're looking at the rules, I'm not sure we should have made it at this late date.
I'd be interested in your thought process on that. So maybe can we expect to get something this week, just so we can, if that is something that's agreed upon, that we can have those conversations?
Sure.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. City Manager, is it the assumption, or is it true or not true, that the additional recycling will be subsidized by those who are not participating?
Well, I think what ends up happening is that we're building a citywide program, and I think as we heard about the discussion in Rantoul, the cost of recycling services is paid by 100% of the residents, even though only 38% are using it. There may be, to that same effect, as we've had the discussions about people that are in their houses or are gone for certain periods of time, they are paying for the service that others are enjoying. And some of that is just by its nature. What we're trying to provide is, we're not really providing universal trash pickup for commercial entities and industrial entities. This is a service for residential customers. And with that, we have to make some determination about, we're going to try and share that. To get the lowest price, we're going to try and spread that cost throughout everyone and say that all of the residential customers are going to pay a base rate to cover all of those costs.
And so when we were talking about the subscription service, were those who subscribed, were they picking up extra cost and the others were not? When you're talking subscription?
Under our current recycling program, where it's provided, you're paying right now, today, with PDC, you paid to deposit, a $50 deposit to get a recycling toter. Then you would be part of the program right now. It's a subscription service. So then you would...
Oh, that's the subscription.
It will come by and if they see that toter out, they're gonna pick it up on recycling day, and that's what's going to happen at your house. So.
Thank you.
I have a question going back to the recycling. Considering some of the items that are recycled may not actually be sold to be recycled, whether there isn't a market for it or any other reason, where are those items disposed of, or what landfill do those go to?
I don't know where those non-recyclable material or those materials which aren't recycled are disposed of at this time. We can reach out and find that out for you.
Is that a question that could be answered tonight from Matt, Mr. Coulter?
Just so you're aware, out of all the recycling material that comes to MRFs, material recovery facilities, about 15 to 20% of that is called residual waste, which actually ends up in a landfill, unfortunately. But it's product that cannot be recycled through the process of trying to separate everything.
So
go ahead.
Contaminated or just?
Contaminated, residuals that fall through screens and the processing, it's almost too costly to run them again because of the cost to actually process all those recyclables. So it ends up as residual waste from a MRF. The other thing, as far as where it goes, currently it goes to one of our landfills, either in Hopedale or Clinton, Illinois, on the residual waste from our processing facility.
And the reason it goes outside of Peoria is because the tipping fee's less?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions this evening? Councilman Sear?
Last question, Mr. Mayor, for Mr. Manager. So what's the annual contract for 2019, roughly, ballpark?
Ballpark in 2019, we would be looking at a total contract price of just under $8 million, right in that, or just at $8 million, right in that area there.
$8 million.
Yeah.
With a 91% rate collection. So we're leaving on the table 9% of $800,000, you said? $8 million, you said?
$8 million is the...
So 9% would be $720,000. Any way to have some type of enterprise deal with PDC where if we get a higher collection, we can split some? No, how do we get to, it kind of bothers me that we can't get to 97, 98, or even 100%. Well, anyway, we can, would PDC being an independent corporation do a better job at us at collecting also for a fee if they get it up over 91%?
I think we looked at collections and the collection issue. Now you're starting to add $2, I think, is what we were looking at per household per month just to have them do the collections. So again, you're looking at trying to increase that collection cost to have that side of it privatized out.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any further questions this evening? I'd add my thanks to the manager and his staff for a lot of really good information. Thanks to the Coulter Enterprise that was here tonight to help us with some of these questions. This will be on the agenda again next Tuesday for discussion, right, Mr. Manager? So I guess part of this will be what the determination is of our corporation counsel on our ability to do additional due diligence, but regardless, this will be back on the agenda for more discussion next Tuesday. So if I'm not seeing any more lights, which I'm not, this would be last call for questions in the policy session. I would ask for a motion to close the Councilwoman Jensen.
This is just a basic question, and I should know, but I don't have it in my materials here that we were given. Is that what's the deadline for us to respond or to make a decision on the RFP?
Well, there is the issue of the incentives with PDC that
right.
they've given us a date for that. You know, and I could certainly talk to them about an extension, as Councilman Riggenbach had asked. But what we were trying to do was get this contract approved to provide whoever the new vendor is enough time to order vehicles so that they can be ready to go with new vehicles as they move into this contract in mid-2019.
So do you have a goal date?
As soon as possible.
Okay. Thank you.
So if there's no further questions, we have a motion to close the policy session by Councilmember Sear, seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel. Please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously. The policy session is closed. Madam Clerk.
We're at citizens' opportunity to address the City Council.
I have no cards here, but if there's any citizens who would like to address the City Council at this time, you're welcome to join us at the center podium. And okay, I think we might have missed new business on this. Was there new business on this?
No, this is a special meeting. There's no new business.
New business. Okay. So with that, I'm not seeing any lights all of a sudden. So we have no citizens to address. Madam Clerk?
We have an executive session.
Mr. Leist?
Yes, Your Honor. A motion would be appropriate pursuant to Section 2C11 of the Open Meetings Act relative to the exemption of discussion of pending litigation, as well as 2C21, which has to do with the approval of previous closed minutes.
Okay. We have a motion to go into executive session. Councilman Sear, seconded by Councilman Ruckriegel. Please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously, and we have a motion to adjourn by Councilman Regenbach, seconded by Councilmember Moore. Please cast your ballots. That motion also passes unanimously. We'd like to thank our listening and viewing audience this evening. We'll be back next Tuesday for regularly scheduled council. This meeting is adjourned.
How's your foot? Is it better?
Yeah, I'm not having any pain or issues, so I'm ready to get rid of the foot. I go back Thursday.
Oh, good. Is it still swollen? Less
No,
swollen?
it seems
Oh,
to be
that's good.
Yeah, it's less swollen now than it has been for months.
Oh, that's good.
So I think I'm so used to wearing slip-on flap shoes that are light because the weight of this boots is.
You know, get Dave for his.
Oh, that's even more.
Yeah.